With the PS4 Pro right around the corner, as well as the upcoming Xbox Scorpio, 4K gaming is bringing its way into the console space. But now here's the question. Are you actually going to be able to get the most out of it, even if you have a 4K TV? Why do you say we find out? So let's face it, most of us don't have 4K TVs right now. Most of us are running on 1080p TVs right now, and that's fine for the most part. It obviously will not get you the best quality when it comes to the Xbox Scorpio or the PS4 Pro, but we also have to look at a couple things when it comes to 4K TVs. This includes size, price, and their HDR compatibility, since we already know the PS4 Pro will support HDR, as well as all of the already released Xbox One S, so it's safe to assume that the Xbox One Scorpio, or Project Scorpio, whatever they're calling it, will support HDR. So we have to look at these different factors when we're talking about, well, whether we're going to upgrade to a 4K TV by the time either of these consoles are released. So the first thing we want to talk about is the size of the television. Now, most of what I've read has shown that if you don't have at least a 60-inch 4K TV and you're sitting within 8 feet of said TV, you're not really going to notice a difference between 1080p and 4K. So you have to take into account where you're gaming, the amount of room you have to put a television there, and how close you're going to be sitting to the television. Otherwise, you're not really going to notice a huge difference when it comes to the display and the quality between 1080p and 4K. Now, does this mean that if you don't have enough room for a 60-inch, that you won't notice anything at all? Not necessarily. Again, the 60-inch and 8 feet is for the 60-inch TVs. Obviously, if you're going to have, say, a 40 or a 50-inch TV, and you're going to be sitting a little bit closer than 8 feet, you might still get the exact same noticeable quality difference. So take into account where you're going to be gaming and how much room you have. These are going to be important factors. However, this doesn't mean that moving up to a 4K TV is going to give you no benefit whatsoever. Obviously, these 4K TVs are more future-proofed for 4K content. The ones that do come with HDR are, again, future-proofed for HDR content, which currently, that I'm aware of anyway, no 1080p TV supports. So there is still a benefit to moving up to a 4K TV. Unfortunately, the price is still pretty high for most 4K TVs out there. If we're looking at a couple different models here, most of them are showing up anywhere between, for a 40-inch, about $460 or so, all the way up to a 70-inch, which are going up to about $1,900. Pretty sure most of us don't have an extra $2,000 sitting around just to buy a television. But going up to 50-inch is just under $600, and a 60-inch is around $800. So the long and short of it is, if you're going to get a PS4 Pro and or an Xbox One Scorpio, as well as a 4K TV, you're going to be looking at quite a bit of money. The PS4 Pro is set to retail at $400, and then you're going to be looking to spend at least another $460 on a 40-inch TV, all the way up to about $2,000 or close to it for a 70-inch 4K TV. That's a lot of money, and that's not exactly something that we're all going to be able to do at any given time. Let's just be honest. So if we're going to be looking at it, if you're going to be planning on buying a PS4 Pro and you want a 4K TV with HDR, figure to be spending at least around $900 after taxes. So that's the price, and it's a pretty good chunk of money. Next, you have to look at some of the features of the TVs, and I would suggest using rtings.com, ratings.com. That's Romeo, Tango, Indigo, November, Golf, Sierra.com. They seem to have a pretty good amount of information on a lot of 4K TVs with HDR, as well as their gaming performance, which is incredibly useful when you're talking about getting a 4K TV for gaming. We have to remember that a lot of 4K TVs, they're not designed with gaming in mind. Their refresh rates are fairly high, And as a result, that can cause input lag. So you're going to have to look at some things. And I'm basically going to be looking at one of them that they say is good for the mid-range. Obviously, those of us not willing to be spending, $2,000 on a television. But that also is fairly decent for gaming. Now, any of us who game on PC already know that we want as little input lag as possible. Most of us are going for monitors that have, say, a 1 millisecond refresh rate, which is pretty fast, okay? A lot of these TVs end up having more than that. In fact, many of the ones that I've been looking at on ratings.com, whatever you want to call it, are going up past 50 milliseconds. Now, that's not exactly a long amount of time, obviously. However, this can create input lag. And as a result, we don't want that when it comes to gaming on a television. You want as close to 1 millisecond as possible. The TV that I'm going to be looking at is, I think, around 13 milliseconds, but I've seen some on this site that are over 50 milliseconds. So we need to take this into account when we're looking at TVs for gaming. Actually, I was wrong. The TV I'm looking at is 18 milliseconds, just so you know. That's 0.0187 seconds for refresh rate. Anyway, like I was saying, the refresh rate is going to be important, so that's something you're going to want to look at when it comes to which TVs you're going to be looking at. I don't recommend anything much higher than that. If you can get even lower, definitely go for it if it's within your price range. Now, I don't plan on going into everything about each TV here, or any TV, really. There's way too much to go through. So the next thing we want to look at is HDR compatibility. HDR stands for High Dynamic Range for color, and it allows for the televisions or the displays, whichever you're looking at, monitors or TVs, to display more shades of a color, basically, more variance on each specific color. This allows for greater color density as well as a more realistic look to the images. Currently, there are two main forms of HDR that are on the market. You have HDR10, which both the Xbox One S and the PlayStation 4 support, so we can assume that probably HDR10 is going to be what the Project Scorpio supports, but we can't be sure. And there's Dolby Vision. There are a couple differences between these, and let's get into them. Now, to be clear, these are not the only two HDR formats that are currently on the market. These are just the two widely most used. There are at least two others that are vying for this. So, hey, yay, format wars. Anyway, the main differences between HDR10 and Dolby Vision is that HDR10 uses 10-bit color, which is where it gets the name HDR10, and Dolby Vision uses 12-bit. That in itself is not a huge amount of difference. The big difference is that Dolby Vision does allow for what they call dynamic HDR, which means that the people who make the games or the movies that support HDR can actually adjust the amount of the color variance on the fly. This is nice, however, it's not exactly going to make developing games that much better. In fact, it will just add to the development cost, which is most likely why both the PS4 and the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One S support HDR10. The other major difference is that Dolby Vision does not require HDMI 2.0A. The metadata is sent in band, so it will work through a regular HDMI 2.0. Hopefully both consoles will come with compatible HDMI cables. That is definitely going to be an issue otherwise and incur an additional cost, which none of us really want. Now, if you already have a Dolby Vision 4K TV, does this mean you're SOL? Not necessarily. Supposedly, Dolby Vision can work with HDR10, and it just won't get the additional benefits of the Dolby Vision. That's really about it. However, since it's free to content creators, but not free to TV manufacturers, it could incur a slight additional cost on the cost of every television. So do you have to upgrade to a 4K TV right away? No, you don't. The 1080p TVs will still work fine, and as long as you have a Pro or a Scorpio, and they're using the Pro mode in the PS4 Pro, or whatever they're going to call it in the Xbox One Scorpio, expect to see better frame rates and a more consistent 1080p resolution. You might also see better anti-aliasing through what's known as super sampling, where they actually render the video at a higher rate and then they downsample it to fit 1080p. This is more processor intensive, but it works pretty well. That's actually how my Diablo works. It actually renders at 4K and then is downsampled through my video card to 1080p. And it works for Diablo, but Diablo is not the most graphically intensive game out there. For more graphically intensive games, this could cause an issue as far as the processing power of the consoles go, but we're going to have to wait and see on that. So my advice is definitely go to sites like ratings.com or other rating sites and look at the TVs you may be interested in. They're going to give you a lot of different things about them, such as the color depth, the glare resistance, stuff like that. And they're going to help you in the long run. You don't have to upgrade to a 4K TV right away, but you might eventually want to upgrade if you're going to be planning on getting a PS4 Pro or an Xbox Scorpio. Alright, thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys later.
Yes. I need to go back.
Impressive.
The light grows stronger within you.
Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. If you liked it, please hit the like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike button. Either way, I'm good. Also, if you enjoyed the video and wish to help support in making more, consider visiting my Patreon page located in the description below. And again, thank you very much.